I'd like to share some thoughts now on the PHAA requirement that every year for earning an English credit, students have to have at least one public speaking opportunity beyond the immediate family. And this is a requirement that a number of families are a little confused about. They wonder what qualifies for a speech, what qualifies for the proper audience, how long does the speech need to be, etc. And why do we ask for it? I'll share a little bit here about my own background. When I was in high school, I was rather shy, and I literally never gave anything that could be considered a public speech. In fact, my high school started a public speaking class when I was in 11th grade, and I thought it sounded pretty interesting, but I realized quickly that I would never sign up for it because, after all, I would have to give a public speech if I took it, and I was too shy to do that. I now, as an adult, have given many public talks, usually regarding homeschooling, but other topics too. I feel very comfortable as a public speaker. And I think this is one of our really positive requirements for the PHAA English credit. We've seen kids grow from freshman year to senior year in the level of comfort they feel as a speaker. We've seen many co-op groups across the state work this PHAA requirement for public speaking into their classes. They ask students to do presentations in class, in part because they know many students are part of our program and this will help them out. Many students gravitate towards the wonderful public speaking and debate programs that are now all over the country for homeschoolers. It's just made families in Pennsylvania really aware of the value of public speaking and all of the possible ways they could meet this requirement in a way that's meaningful for their family. And first I'd like to share some of the things like what qualifies as a speech to meet this requirement and what might not. In our guide to the Pennsylvania Homeschooler's Diploma, we say that, well, if a student gives a public recitation of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, well, a very useful opportunity to learn how to project their voice and speak with variety and engage their audience, and maybe even to memorize something important and to grapple with a key document, it's not going to meet this requirement for public speech. It would have counted for Abraham Lincoln, but it wouldn't count for the PHAA student currently. We want this to be the student coming up with their own ideas and sharing them with a particular audience. Some examples of meaningful public speaking opportunities that I've seen students have. I just evaluated a girl this past week that's very involved in the family's Catholic Church. And as an 11th grader, she was asked to come in and speak to a 9th grade class at her church of their Catholic education classes. So these were students slightly younger than her. And she was asked to speak on a topic she had developed for her PHAA research paper this year, which related to her faith. And she gave a very motivating, encouraging talk to these younger students. I'm sure they really looked up to her. They felt in tune with what she was saying because she was just a little bit older than them. She found it a very meaningful experience also. She was sharing about a topic she cared about with an audience she cared about, and that's ideal. We recently, at our PHAA conference this year, this spring in 2018, we had for the first time what we called a FED Talk contest at our conference for students. And FED may sound a little bit like TED Talks, the ones you see online that are about 15 minutes long. We gave the students, we told them FED stood for Pennsylvania Homeschoolers Educational Discoveries. FED, P-H-E-D. And that they were to give a short talk. We told them aim for 5 minutes. And on some aspect of their homeschooling. Something they were dealing with, something they were studying and learning about, something funny. It could be anything, but something related directly to their homeschooling experience. We got a very good response for our first year, and I know many of the students who were attending the session were very motivated, and they're already planning what they'll talk about next year. The winning talk was a very, very funny talk, which we'll be putting on our PHAA website, about a girl describing a time when she and her older sister were taken by their mother on a homeschool field trip to see a fireworks factory as part of their chemistry course at home. It was a very, very funny talk because this was not your usual sort of factory. And I think the students listening to this talk or talks like this, they realize like they have something to share. They all have stories that are funny, that are amusing, that are different and unique, and they can share that with an audience. Sometimes, especially in the early days of our program, we did have students who said, I'm not part of a homeschool group. I don't have anyone I could give a talk to. What could I do? And very early on, we said to them, well, you'll have to find an audience. And here's what some kids did. There was one student that my husband evaluated who was a vocational student. He was not planning on going on to college, and yet he had to meet this public speaking requirement too. And he was very interested in, oh, this will date us, CB radios, those type of radios that truck drivers use, I think. And he was very into that. And he decided he would call up a local assisted living home, a nursing home, and ask if he could come in and give a little talk about this to the residents. They were thrilled because not too many people would come in and offer to speak to their group. He came in, he brought his equipment with him. He gave a very engaging talk. He had stuff to show them. They loved him. It gave him a real boost as a student to realize that even though at first he thought he had nothing to share about, he didn't feel like he was an academic kid who would ever use public speaking, he did have something to share about. And he touched probably these people's hearts by just being willing to come in and speak to them as an audience. Since then, people have found, a wide range of ways to meet this requirement. And sometimes we've had to deal with students who may have an issue with severe anxiety, where this would be a very difficult thing for them to do. And like any of our aura students who may have some special needs, they may not be, for lack of a better word, an academically bright student. And how can they meet this requirement? And again, as with all of our PHAA requirements, the evaluator has the ability to be flexible and to adapt things. Sometimes I've had students simply give a brief talk to me at their evaluation meeting. I'm outside of their immediate family. Maybe we'll bring my husband down so we have an audience of 2, and maybe the student's parents. And that will be good enough for that student for that year. Maybe that will give them the courage to try for a little bit bigger audience the next year. Some students worry that our requirement may require them to speak without a script. I remember one year we had a girl who was a little bit hard of hearing. She had hearing aids. Speaking, although she was a brilliant girl and spoke fine, speaking was not her forte, something that made her feel nervous because she knew her voice sounded a little bit funny. And she was especially worried that our requirement was asking her to speak without notes. Not true. We said to her, if you want to write out your whole speech, that's fine. Again, using Abe Lincoln's example of the Gettysburg Address, he certainly wrote out the whole speech. A student can always feel that they can deviate a little bit when they're speaking, but if they need to start with a written speech, fine. They should do it in a way, though, that's addressing the people that are there. That's not just being up in front of people and never looking at them and just reading in a monotone. They should speak the speech, not just read the speech. And there's a difference. But if it makes a student feel more comfortable to have the whole text written out, that's fine. If they feel good just having an outline, fine. If they feel confident, they've had a number of public speaking experiences and they feel they can just wing it, excellent. I remember in one of our very early graduation ceremonies, there was a girl who was going to meet her public speaking requirement at the graduation ceremony. And her graduation, her public speaking for that year. She had done previous. She was a comfortable public speaker. She was wonderful. She spoke from the heart. Probably every mother in the place was crying by the end of it. And she didn't need to prepare or outline or use note cards. She simply spoke, and it was very meaningful. All of these types of public speaking opportunities can count to meet this requirement. It's a flexible requirement, one that will stretch your student to go beyond themselves, but one that every student can meet. I think it's important to encourage kids to talk about something that they care about. I always remember my own son, one of my sons, who felt uncomfortable speaking before others. He was a computer programmer, he was a chess player, he was oriented that way. Oftentimes those people are not that comfortable speaking before others. But because he had to do this every year of high school, and we set up supportive and encouraging and fun opportunities for this, often with other kids in our homeschool group, he gained a lot of confidence. And when he went away one summer in high school to the old Pennsylvania Governor's School for Sciences, and their small group that did a research project together in the summer had to give a public presentation at the end of the program. Who did they choose to do the public speaking? My son. And he never would have been able to do that. I don't think he'd be able to do that if he hadn't had these lead-up experiences because of our requirement. He now does a lot of public speaking. He has a lot of public speaking opportunities through his job working for Google as a programmer. You wouldn't think a programmer would do public speaking, but he does. And I think this is a requirement that will serve all of our students well into their future.